It is our pleasure to warmly welcome Swami Sarvapriyananda ji to deliver our keynote. Swami Sarvapriyananda ji is the minister and spiritual leader of the Vedanta Society of New York and assumed his duties in January of 2017. Before that, he was the assistant minister of the Vedanta Society of Southern California since December of 2015. Swamiji joined the Ramakrishna Math and Mission in 1994 and received sannyas in 2004. He was the first registrar of the Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda University at Belur Math, and he holds a degree in business management from the Xavier Institute of Management. Today, he will talk under the topic of principles of Sanatana Dharma, the concept of free will and karma. We invite you to send in your questions and comments on Facebook, and we'll get to them towards the end of the session. Without further ado, Swami Sarvapriyananda ji. Namaste.
Namaste, namaste. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'll start with a short prayer.
Okay.
Om asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityur ma amritam gamaya Om shanti shanti shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Thank you for having me in this the Anubhava 2020 conference. I've been there earlier at the temple, but this time, of course, everything is online. Before I start, I would also like to congratulate the Yuva Rhythms for their extraordinary, excellent presentation. So the subject that you have picked for this afternoon for the keynote address is the question of free will, which is a very interesting philosophical problem in world philosophy, in world religions. In fact, even today, at this day and age, if you look it up, you will find it's a hot topic in neuroscience and in the modern philosophy of mind and in many areas. So what is our take from the Sanatana Dharma? What is our perspective? So what I'm going to do now in the few minutes ahead is talk about what the problem is, what is the issue, and finally, what is our perspective on it. So free will is something that we all sort of intuitively feel that I can think of something and I can do it. I feel like if there's a cookie and I want to eat it, I can go ahead and eat it, or I may not eat it. I have the freedom to choose and act as I please. So this feeling that we all have, that we have some kind of freedom of choice and action, this is free will. What is the problem then? The problem is that this free will seems to be there and not there at the same time. We seem to be free, and yet if you look at it a little more closely, we seem not to be free. In fact, when you investigate this whole concept of free will, this whole phenomenon of free will, from a philosophical perspective, from a scientific perspective, and from a religious perspective, you begin to see that there may not be free will at all. What I mean by that is, for example, when you look back at the Bhagavad Gita, so Sri Krishna seems to be absolutely clear that there is free will when he says something like, Uddharet atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet. Lift yourself up by yourself. Do not degrade yourself by yourself. For the self is you yourself are your best friend, and you yourself are your worst enemy. And then he goes on to explain that when you use your free will to uplift yourself, when we develop ourselves and we grow to our potential, you are your own best friend. But when we do not do that, and we degenerate, we do not attain our potential, we become unhappy. So you are acting against yourself, as it were. You are your own worst enemy. So that seems to imply that there is free will. If there was no free will, how would we develop ourselves? Where is the question of telling us to do something if you're not free to do it? On the other hand, he also says in the Bhagavad Gita more than once, one conclusion that he draws again and again in the Bhagavad Gita is something like this. In the 13th chapter, it goes, Prakrityeva karmani kriyamanani sarvasha yapashyati tathatmanam akattaram sapashyati. Nature alone does everything. We are deluded when we think we are doing something. The one who realizes this realizes that the self is not a doer. We actually do not do anything. We only think that we are doing something. The Lord controls everything, and we are like puppets on a machine. We are being whirled around by the will of the Lord. So which is it? Do we have free will or do we not have free will? The Gita seems to say both. Coming to our age, Swami Vivekananda, he exhorts us again and again. He says, arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. Obviously, that means we have free will. Otherwise, how would you do any of that? At the same time, here's a quote I pulled up from the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. He says, as long as you are in the network of time, space, and causation, to say you're free is nonsense. Because in that network, all is under rigorous law, sequence, and consequence. Every thought you think is caused, every feeling has been caused. To say that the will is free is sheer nonsense. Will is caught in the network of Maya, and therefore free will is a misnomer. It means nothing, sheer nonsense. So is all this talk about freedom. Now, again and again, we find in the teachings of our scriptures, the teachings of the great saints, that we are not free. It's actually, we are entirely dependent on God's grace. So this is the problem, you see. This brings us to what is called determinism. So in its basic form, the problem is this, that our actions are events in time. So every human action, whatever we do, is an event in time. Whatever is an event in time has a cause, something before it. And it's a consequence of that cause. There is a cause and there is an effect. So if our actions are effects of previous causes, then our actions are not free. Why? Why not? Because if the cause is there, then the consequence must come. The cause is there, the effect must come. It's not free that it may come or may not come. No. If there is a particular cause, then the effect is already predetermined. So this is called determinism. And this follows from a scientific worldview. If everything is following certain scientific laws, then where is the question of freedom? What is free and who is free? Everything is tied by cause and effect. That brings us, this is a good time to introduce karma. So karma, the concept of karma, the law of karma, is a central feature of Indian thought. Not just Sanatana Dharma, not just Hinduism, but Buddhism and Jainism and Sikhism, all the religions which originate in India, they all hold on to some version of karma. So what does karma, what is it in brief? It just means that every action has effects. Actions have consequences. If I do something consciously, which is according to dharma or ethics, I know I'm doing something ethical. So that is called dharma. And the result of dharma is what we call punya. Punya means merit, something good. And that punya gives rise to sukha. Sukha means happiness. So some pleasant thing happens to me because I did dharma sometime in my past, maybe in my past life. And that gave rise to a potency called punya. And the punya fructifies, gives its result. It manifests in my life as something pleasant. I may not know what is the connection, what good thing had I done in the past to deserve this nice thing happening to me now. That is not obvious to me. I may have forgotten, I may not see the connection, but the idea is that it is cause and effect. And the opposite also holds true. If I deliberately do something I know to be wrong, adharma, not dharma, the result will be a demerit, papa. And the result of that is dukkha, some kind of unpleasant, unwanted consequence in my life. Again, I may not know the connections, but it happens. You may say, what is the basis for believing in this? The basis is just causality. We believe in causality in every aspect of our life, that there's a cause and effect. That's the very, very basis of rational thought. All of science is built on causality. All of common sense is built on causality. So karma can be seen as an extension of that idea of causality into our moral life, into our ethical life. But this creates a problem for us because if my actions, if my thoughts are determined by what I have done in the past, if I'm sort of programmed by my past actions, then how am I free now? Even the desires that I've coming up in my mind, they are there because of, they are conditioned because of my past experiences in life, the past karma that I've done. And my capacity to react to those desires, whether I will do it in a dharmic way or in an adharmic way, what I will think, what I will say, and what I will do, could it be that they are all determined because I'm conditioned by my past karma? So doesn't karma mean that I'm not free? And yet it's rather strange, because karma also means I'm free, because I have done these things. It is, if I'm trapped, if I'm in some sense conditioned, I'm conditioned by myself because I did it in the past. So this law of karma seems to be a kind of a limitation on our free will. This is called determinism. You can put the law of karma in a more modern secular language. I am conditioned by my genetics. I'm conditioned by my upbringing in society. I'm conditioned by the stimuli that I'm exposed to in my environment. And so what I do, what I say and what I do is not free. I am being programmed, conditioned, pushed, cajoled, as it were. And what I do is a consequence of all these things. In no sense is it free. So determinism seems to say that we do not have free will. There is another point of view in this whole debate of free will, which is called, which are nowadays called libertarian theories, which say that no, we do have free will. So what are the arguments in favor of free will? I'll give you two. That we do have free will. One is that free will is a mental fact. We feel free. Just because we feel free, can you say that we are free? Well, yes, in a certain way. Our mental states are directly experienced by us. So for example, when I say that I am in pain, so it must be true. The moment I say I am in pain, I feel pain. If I do feel pain, then it's a fact that I am in pain. Exactly like that. If I say I am happy, I know my internal state of happiness, and therefore it must be true that I am happy because I experience happiness. In the same way, if I experience freedom, if I experience my freedom of choice, my free will, then in some sense I must be free because it's an internal state. To make it more clear, think about contrasts. Sometimes we feel free, sometimes we do not feel free. So sometimes when we feel pressured, or sometimes a person is addicted to drugs or something like that, and they feel that I can't let go of it. I'm sort of trapped, either by my own addiction or by some force from outside, then we feel not free. And in contrast to that, sometimes we feel free. I have a choice to take this vacation or to buy this gadget or to eat this food or that food. So the contrast in our minds, you see, sometimes feeling pressured, not free, and sometimes feeling free and having my own choice. This very contrast shows that free will is possible, that I do have free will at least some of the time. So that's one argument in favor of free will. Another argument, strong argument in favor of free will is, notice that everything that we do sort of assumes free will, especially something like justice, our entire justice system. When we accuse somebody of doing wrongdoing, we naturally assume free will. It is that person has done something wrong, need not have done that, could have done something right, did something bad, hence accused. When the court punishes somebody, puts somebody in prison, one thing that is assumed is free will. It's that person who has done something criminal or something wrong, need not have done that, could have made better choices in life, which means the court believes, society believes, we believe that person had free will. Without free will, you can't blame somebody. Without free will, you cannot punish somebody. Without free will, there is no guilt, even personal guilt. I feel guilty of having done something in my past. Why do I feel guilty? Because I feel that I had the free will, the choice of not doing it, and I still did something wrong, and hence I feel regret or guilt. The very feeling of guilt or regret would not be there if we did not have free will. So the existence of courts and laws and punishment and regret or guilt, all of this points to the fact that free will must be a fact. You can't dismiss free will. So we have these two kinds of theories: a deterministic, hard deterministic theory based on our scientific worldview, which says that there is no free will. By the way, there is even some neuroscience evidence, it seems nowadays, to show that our feeling of free will is an illusion. We really don't have free will. It's all determined by our neural pathways and connections. So that's one point of view. The other point of view is the libertarian point of view, which says that no, we do have free will. There is a third point of view which sort of synthesizes both. The term for that is compatibilism, which speaks for itself. Is there compatibility between no free will and free will? Compatibilism says that freedom and determinism are not opposed to each other. Freedom requires determinism. In what sense? I'll give you 3 quick examples. I am free to control my body. I want to lift my hand, I can lift my hand. I want to say something, and I do say it. It's only because the nervous system and the muscles of the body, they are all linked in very deterministic ways. I think of something, and then the whole body now carries out my wish. If it was all chaos, nothing led to anything else, there was no causal connection between my thinking, my willing, and the nerves in my hand and the muscles in my hand, I couldn't even lift my hand. I mean, you just have to look at a person suffering from paralysis. So in paralysis, there is no connection between what the person wills. The person wants to raise his or her hand, but the muscles won't obey. The nerves won't obey. There's no deterministic connection anymore. So you see, the deterministic connection in the body and the nervous system enables us to have free will. Another good example is a mathematician. So when you do mathematics, there are laws of mathematics. There are laws of arithmetic. So are the laws of arithmetic or mathematics constraining you, preventing you? Is it a constraint on your free will? No, it enables the mathematician to do mathematics. If it was all chaos, there's nothing, no law, logic to it, then the mathematician could not do mathematics. So the ability to do mathematics, ability to music, for example, there are laws of music. There are certain principles. They don't constrain you. They don't limit your freedom. They, in fact, give you the freedom to do great music, to do great mathematics. A nice example we find in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. So somebody told this story to Sri Ramakrishna about the question of free will. Imagine a cow. This is a story from India. Imagine a cow. A farmer has tied the cow to a tree in a field, and the cow, if the cow gets up and starts eating grass and keeps pulling at the rope to get to the greener grass, the farmer may come and give it a longer rope, or maybe give some more rope, or maybe go and tie it in a place with more grass. But if the cow keeps quiet, just sits down and swishes its tail or something like that, then the farmer will leave it alone. Exactly like that, God, if you will, has given us certain amount of freedom, but certain amount of restriction also. The length of the rope is the amount of freedom we have, and the radius in which we can move around, that's the restriction, that's the limit of our free will. But if we utilize it, if we use it, if we push against our boundaries, maybe the expanse, the amount of freedom given to us increases. That's a good way of looking at it. That's a good way of reconciling freedom and determinism. So what do we make of all of this? What's the conclusion? A beautiful paper which I'll be happy to share through you if you like. Professor Arindam Chakravarti, who is a brilliant teacher of Indian philosophy, he is in the University of Hawaii now. He wrote a paper on free will and Sanatana Dharma and free will, so which I'm drawing the conclusion from. He actually quotes from Vivekananda. Vivekananda says, "From freedom we come, in bondage we exist, unto freedom we go." So the individual soul, we come from our real nature, which is Brahman, which is the absolute, which is infinite, free existence, consciousness, bliss. And we seem to be trapped in these bodies and minds, limited individualities with very limited freedom. So there is bondage, not much freedom. But ultimately we go to moksha. The goal of Hinduism, the goal of Sanatana Dharma, the goal of all Indian systems of thought is freedom. Moksha it literally means freedom. Nirvana, kaivalya, all of the terms used in Indian philosophies, they all mean freedom. So what Vivekananda wants to say is that right now, the will may not be free because the will is subject to the laws of science and psychology and conditioning, but freedom is our real nature. So when we become enlightened, when we attain moksha, we go to freedom, not free will, but freedom. From a devotional perspective, what it means is we recognize that the feeling of freedom we have now, the free will which we feel now, is ultimately an illusion. But we must use this illusion of free will right now to the hilt. Otherwise, we will not attain the freedom, which is the goal. It sounds complicated, but actually it's pretty simple. It's basically what we do. When we use the kind of freedom available to us, which appears to be that we have some free will, we use it, and then we attain freedom where there is no more willing, there is no more will, but freedom is there. We attain oneness with God, we attain spiritual freedom, whatever you call it. And this Professor Arindam Chakravarti, he ends with a very beautiful conclusion. He says the best way to live, when we hear all this, that we have free will, but it seems to be an illusion, and ultimately there is freedom. The best way to live is to be aware that our so-called free will, this freedom is sort of borrowed from God, borrowed from that ultimate reality, and acknowledge that by surrendering to God. And that surrendering to God is not like becoming a slave or something else, because that God in Sanatana Dharma is our own higher self. It's like surrendering to your own higher self. Then the Gita, what Swami Vivekananda says, all of this becomes meaningful. That as the lower self, identified with body and mind, we do not have much freedom. But when we acknowledge our higher self and try to attain that, then we have freedom. So Professor Arindam Chakravarti says, we live by salutation. Nama, he says. Nama literally means na mama, not mine. In the Hindu salutation in the temple, all the time we do namaskara. Namaste, namaskara, nama. It means not mine, not I. Thou, my Lord, not I. So this acknowledgement that it is God's will which is operating through everything, even appearing as my so-called free will, this acknowledgement is the wisest way of living. Do what you have to do, live the life you have to live with the consciousness that it is God's will or my higher self where this freedom is to be attained. Yeah, I think that about covers it all. And yeah, we still have some time.
Well, thank you so much, Swami Sarvapriyananda ji. That was very articulate and it really brings us, rounds out the discussion about this free will concept and karma. So thank you. We have a few questions coming in from the audience related to this topic. The first one being this contrast that you speak about, the free will being free and not being free at the same time. And actually, sort of a pendulum. Sometimes we feel free, sometimes we don't feel free. Is that a contrast that everybody feels, or is that a result of one's karma? So does everybody go through that, opposing natures, or is it sort of something that the human mind that's not able to grasp the concept of free will goes through?
And it's a good question. Does everybody feel this? We all do. In our state of ignorance, not being enlightened, not being sufficiently spiritually advanced. But there is a class of people, when we become spiritually advanced, when we become enlightened, when we are what is called free while living. Look at the interesting term, Jivan Mukta, free while living. While still in this body, while still in this life, we attain to freedom. So that's what Vivekananda says, attaining to freedom, but then it's no longer a will. What is it like? So what's the difference? In our case, Arjuna puts it very beautifully in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Atakena prayuktoyam papam charati purusha. Anichannapi varshneya baladiva niyojita. In the fourth chapter, I think, or third chapter, fourth chapter, he asks Krishna, why does a person do wrong things? What we know to be wrong, what I have decided I won't do it. I am on a diet, I will not eat that extra cookie, and I end up eating that extra cookie. Why do I do that? That's a perennial human question, actually. Why do we, even after understanding what is good, why are we unable to do it? Why are we unable to follow it up? And he asks that free will question. Even though I don't want to do a wrong thing, I am as it were pushed by something. Baladeva, as if by some force, I'm pushed into doing it. What is it? And then Krishna answers, he says that kama esha, krodha esha, desire and anger, these are powerful enemies in spiritual life. These are what limits our freedom. That's our condition. That's what the questioner is speaking about. We feel freedom, but we also feel constrained. It's because desire, anger, these rule us, and they overrule our better sense, our higher sense. But the enlightened person, it's not that we are forever trapped here. When we become spiritually advanced, when we become enlightened, the situation changes completely. If you are of a devotional nature, you will feel the freedom of God. Everything is God's will. So everything is done by God's will, and that is freedom. You depend entirely on God's will. And the whole universe is an expression of the free will of God acting through you. Or if you are on the path of knowledge, you feel that I am not this body and mind. I am this infinite awareness, existence, consciousness, bliss, Satchidananda, which is always free, was free, is free, and is going to be free forever. So in the path of knowledge, in the path of devotion, when we advance sufficiently, we feel a freedom. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that explanation. And we have another question, which I'll put up here, by Shiva Iyer, who asks, quantum mechanics seems to imply that there is an inherent randomness in the world, which can never be determined. Is this in any way a reaffirmation, or is it sort of refuting our beliefs?
I am not going to answer that directly because I have heard this many times. Because I do not know enough about quantum mechanics to give a very cogent answer. What I do know is that theories have been put forward saying that the inherent randomness, the probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics, doesn't that show that free will is possible? So what we said earlier about determinism, that everything that we do, every action is an event in time. Every event in time has a cause. And if there's a cause, then it is predetermined. If this cause, this effect, then how are we free? Quantum mechanics, it is proposed. I don't understand it enough to say either this way or that way. It is proposed that quantum mechanics shows if events are at the tiniest level in the universe, if it is probabilistic, not hard determinism, if there is an inherent randomness, that shows that free will actually might be a reality.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And another person is asking, if karma is cause and effect, when will the effect of good karma or bad karma be seen?
That's a good question. Swami Vivekananda put it very beautifully in a poem. He says that good, good, bad, bad, and none escape the law. So good karma leads to good results, a pleasant life. Bad karma leads to unpleasant effects. And our life is a mixture of pleasant and unpleasant effects. So when does good karma or bad karma, when does it fructify? It fructifies all the time. It gives results all the time. All our days are filled with certain things happening to us, good and bad. Now, karma can be understood in a very strict sense that whatever is happening to us, and even whatever the events we have in our minds and bodies, they're all results of past karma. In that case, there doesn't seem to be much scope of free will. Even if I think I'm free, it's just being generated by past karma. There is a more looser, more free sense of interpreting the law of karma, which says that just the general outlines of our life are determined by our past karma. So certain good things will happen, certain unpleasant things will happen, but the specifics and the details are often open. And we have a freedom of reacting to these things. That reaction is not determined by karma. So it's like going into a game. Maybe the people you play with, the playground and the equipment you play with, that's given to you. You can't change it. But how you play, to some extent, is still dependent upon you. And on that will depend the results of the game, to some extent at least. So that much freedom we have got. When does the result of that come? So our present life is what is called prarabdha karma. It is a part of our stored up karma. What has been stored up from ages past, in many lives past, a part of that activates and gives rise to this body, to the parents we have, the kind of situation we are born into, the major events of our life, and then we have a certain amount of freedom to play around with these as we will. Is it deterministic? Only to a certain extent. Remember, even if it is determined, it is what we have made of ourselves. It is not somebody else has clamped down on us. We are today what we have made of ourselves, and the way we live our lives today will determine what kind of life we will have later on in the future. So there's a whole theory about this. Some part of it is activated, giving rise to our present life. Other part of it remains stored up. What we do in our present life keeps adding to that store of karma. A lot of good karma gives rise to results quickly. A lot of evil karma gives rise to results quickly. So one practical outcome of all of this is, if you were to give some karma advice, the advice would be to keep on doing good karma, to keep on unselfishly doing good to others, moral, ethical action. Just keep on doing it. What happens is then all our good past karma gets activated. So the results of the good karma keep coming, and the bad karma gets suppressed. So that does not fructify in our present life. The whole point of spirituality, however, is freedom. Freedom from karma. Not to be trapped in this cycle of karma. To realize that our true nature, whether it is God or Brahman, Atman, whatever you call it, is actually beyond karma, beyond determinism. It's only when we are trapped in bodies and minds in this limited individuality that we are subject to karma. As long as we are subject to karma, you can't run away from it. As Swami Vivekananda said, you cannot run away from life. You can't run away from the machine. You must learn how to work the machine, and then it sets you free. So from bad karma to good karma to freedom from karma, that's the path.
Oh, that was so beautifully said, Swami Sarvapriyananda ji. With that, we want to say thank you so much for your time, and thank you for always being a great guru to Akshayam and to all the young people that you've spoken to in the past, and continuing to be a participant in Anubhava. We really do appreciate your time and your knowledge.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Take care. Be safe, everybody.